Congratulations! I'm officially naming you an Internet Criminal Defense Attorney. After a short swearing-in ceremony, you're going to be anointed with all the powers and pedigree of an internet defense lawyer. Now, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will understand that we are just having a good time, and I'm not going to harass anyone involved with this case, in person or on the internet. There you have it, you're now all internet defense attorneys. My name is Goodbye Boudreaux, and I will be acting as your co-counsel and will be with you every step of the way. That's all the good news. Here's the rough news. You need a client. When I began my career in defense, I was lucky enough to get hired by a small firm that could control what clients we took. However, if you're new to practice, the easiest way to get started in criminal defense is by being a court-appointed attorney, so you don't get to pick your clients. So I'm here to tell you that your first client is Brian Koberger. He's a 30-year-old man that was living in Idaho and Washington. He was bullied a lot for being overweight as a kid, but lost 130 pounds in his sophomore year of high school, turned his health around, went to college, got a degree, and became a PhD student in criminology at Washington State. He enjoys boxing, fishing, and the field of criminal justice. And he's also going on trial for the quadruple homicide of 4 college students at the University of Idaho. You're his lawyer now, so what's the plan? Well, let's start with what evidence you have at your disposal. The prosecution has to give you nearly everything they have on your client, so you won't have to worry too much about doing legwork like getting security camera footage and the like. Let's start off easy. Let's start with the crime. It's November 13th, 2022. The location of our crime is a 3-story party house outside the University of Idaho. This place was usually rockin'. There were constantly people coming in and out. There were tons of noise complaints for parties. It said that usually they would leave the door unlocked because it was essentially a revolving door of guests. In the home lived 6 people: Madison Mogan, Xana Kernoodle, Kaylee Gonclaves, and Ethan Chapin, and their 2 roommates. Now, on the night of November 13th, Kaylee and Madison went out on the town and had some drinks. Ethan went to a formal with his sister, then went to a Sigma Chi frat house with Xana. All 4 of them would arrive back at the house at 1:45 a.m. We don't know what happened for the next couple hours, but we know that Xana got a DoorDash order at 4 a.m. One of the roommates woke up at around 4 a.m. and believed she heard Kaylee playing with her dog. At this point, the roommate says she hears someone say, "There's someone here." Now, this was around 4:10, 4:12, and Xana was on TikTok nearby in her room. The roommate then got up, looked out the bedroom door, but did not see anyone. A few minutes later, she believed she heard Xana crying, so she got up and went to her door again. That's when she heard a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help." The roommate opened the door and saw a man in black clothing and a ski mask walking past her. She stood completely frozen and shocked. She would later say she didn't recognize him, but that he was about 5'10", not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. At 4:17 a.m., a security camera about 50 feet away from Xana's room picked up sounds of a barking dog and distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper followed by a loud thud. In the morning, 2 roommates called their friends over because they couldn't wake up one of their friends and they believed that they had passed out. At 11:58 a.m. on November 13th, a 911 call was made by one of the roommates requesting help for an unconscious person. Officers responded and found that all 4 victims had been killed. Officers arrived and found Madison, Xana, Kaylee, and Ethan had all been killed that morning. So let's look at the investigation. We're always looking for shoddy police work. Police are held to a high standard in our society, so we want to be able to track the investigation and see how good their police work was. Police immediately believe that the 4 victims were stabbed and likely attacked in their sleep based on the injuries and where their bodies were found. There are no overt signs of sexual assault on any of the victims. The police find a discarded sheath for a large knife left behind by the killer at the sliding glass door. This confirmed their earlier suspicions of a stabbing. They collect statements from the roommates and start canvassing the area for cameras. They find a security camera next door which shows a white Hyundai Elantra at the house around the time of the killings and then returning again to the scene at 9 a.m. With that little amount of evidence, all they can do is put out a BOLO, or a be on the lookout, to other police to look for this white Hyundai Elantra and or a man between 5'10" and 6 feet with a slightly athletic build and bushy eyebrows. The story's spreading through the town like wildfire, and nearby on campus, a university police officer found a Hyundai Elantra and ran the license plate. This came back to Brian and supplied a picture. The officer noticed that the picture matched the description they were looking for on the BOLO and called it in. Police get the info and run his name through their system. They find body camera of a previous incident with Brian where he ran a red light, and in the footage they notice that he did match the description and he actually gives his phone number. Police then run that phone number through local cell phone towers and discover that he was in the area the night of the crime and the night previous. But cell phone tower data can be complicated, so we're going to need to look more into that. Now that they have a suspicious vehicle, potentially matching what they're looking for, and a guy matching the description, and the GPS data, they know their best bet is to now run the sheath for DNA. They get the DNA from the sheath and need something to compare it to, so they go to Koberger's home and pull DNA from their garbage. They actually get DNA from Brian's father in the garbage and were able to trace that DNA back to Brian and match it with the sheath. This all sounds pretty technical, so we may need to hire an expert or get one of our on-staff experts to explain it to us in a way that we can explain it to the jury to see if there are any problems with the science. DNA would also be later obtained from Brian in something called a buccal swab test. So once the police had zeroed in on Brian and his father were about to drive across the country to Pennsylvania. That's about a 30-hour drive. The police then actually tracked him and his father all the way to Pennsylvania, keeping an eye on him the entire time. They even found excuses to pull him over a couple of times to talk to him. Now we can see on this body camera footage that Brian seems to be getting more and more nervous each time he's pulled over, as if he can suspect there's something going on. Brian would be arrested on December 30th, 2022 and extradited back to Idaho, where he was formally charged on January 5th. So that's generally the story of the investigation. But we're lucky. This has been a very high-profile case, and the internet has been doing its job of collecting rumors and giving us some extra things to look into. That said, the prosecution has also been busy since the arrest and has collected more evidence as well. So let's talk about what else we have to work with. So first off, some new information from the prosecution. Brian was apparently seen in the middle of the night washing his car after the killings wearing surgical gloves. After the arrest, police began looking into a home invasion where a woman found a man hiding in her closet with bushy eyebrows, matching Brian's description, wearing a ski mask and all black. This happened years before the murder, but police now say they have reason to think that this was Brian. There were also no scratches on Brian's face or any areas that would have been exposed during the attack. Amazon receipts have been found for the black clothing, but no receipts for the murder weapon. DNA from 3 different people were found underneath one of the victim's fingernails. However, his defense lawyers in real life tested and showed that none of the 3 DNA profiles under her nails matched Brian. We also recently learned that Brian has autism. His real-life defense team has tried to use this as a basis to have the death penalty taken off the table as a potential punishment. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that his real-life defense team believes he's guilty, but you do want to prepare for all eventualities. While preparing this case brief for you, text messages were released from the roommate that reveal what she was texting either during or immediately after the crime had occurred. I've posted them here, but I'll read along. DM is the roommate who we've been talking about. She's texting her other roommate, BF, as well as Gonclaves, one of the victims. DM says, "No one is really answering, and I'm really confused right now." She then texts Gonclaves, "Kaylee, what's going on?" BF then responds to DM and says, "Yeah, dude, WTF, Xana was wearing all black." DM then says to BF, "I'm freaking out right now. No, it's like a ski mask almost." BF says to DM, "Shut the fuck up, actually." DM then responds, like he had something over his forehead and little and mouth. DM says to BF, "BF, I'm not kidding, I'm so freaked out." BF then responds, "So am I." DM then says, "My phone is going to die." BF responds, "Come to my room, run down here." These text messages were all said to occur within 3 minutes between 4:22 and 4:25 a.m. There are likely more that we, as his online defense attorneys, are not aware of yet. Also, there's no footage of Brian entering or leaving the home or Moscow in general. Police are only relying on the cell phone data and the security footage that show his vehicle outside the home. It also appears that the victims were mutilated in the stabbings. We also now know that Brian turned off his cell phone for about an hour during the time of the crimes, but the towers tracked him driving towards and away from the crime scene. Now, all of this seems to be official from my research, but following are some rumors that I found. These are things that I myself have not been able to substantiate, and we're going to need your help to look around and see if there's any truth to these. One of the most interesting is that students knew about the attacks before noon because there were supposedly texts, Snapchats, and posts about the murders before 911 was ever called. This would obviously be big for us because that could mean other people were at the crime scene and tampering with it before the police arrived. I've also seen speculation that Brian's phone connected to the Bluetooth speakers in the home as many as 12 times. There are also rumors that Brian was allegedly following one of the victims on OnlyFans. There are other unsubstantiated rumors such as the killer was wearing skater shoes or Vans, and there was a rumor that the roommate was sleeping in her own room originally but joined her other roommate after seeing what she believed to be the killer. They apparently then talked themselves into thinking everything was fine and then went to sleep. The text messages that were recently released do seem to lend credence to this rumor. Additionally, people have been scouring the internet and posting what they believe to be posts or messages from Brian on different websites. We would never present any of this evidence without looking into it ourselves and independently verifying it. Rumors will mean nothing in a courtroom. Let's assume that's all we have for now. There's a ton online about this case, so be sure to keep your eyes open and let me know if there's anything we can find or disprove anything that we already think we know. Remember to source the information rather than just taking some random commenter on Reddit at their word. So sticking with all that information, what is our best strategy for defense? First, DNA evidence is complicated and not easy to present. However, in recent times, it can be seen as extremely compelling to a jury. There are a lot of cases where the prosecution can be hesitant to go forward to trial because they don't have DNA evidence and they know how badly juries want it before they will convict, especially in a crime as serious as this. However, there is some DNA evidence in our case, but it all comes from that one sheath. The best thing we can do about the DNA evidence itself is to bring on an expert to look into the data. We are internet lawyers, not scientists. While we should understand the basics of DNA and common pitfalls, we shouldn't assume that we know better than the experts. We will bring someone on to talk about what potential flaws could have occurred in the collection and the testing of the DNA. That said, we never just attack a piece of evidence in only one way if we can help it. The sheath was supposedly found outside the sliding glass door. If this is true, we can definitely insinuate during our questioning that it was planted there by someone other than Brian. This is important because no other DNA was found from Brian in the house that we know of. This will get the jury thinking about what they want from the prosecution to actually find him guilty. Another big one is motive. This is going to be a problem for the prosecution. There's no official reason yet to believe that Brian had a personal reason to kill these girls. There are also no signs of sexual assault, so we can mostly rule out any purely sexual motive. We're going to bring up this lack of motive in our opening statement to the jury and challenge the prosecution at the outset to come up with some sort of motive for these crimes. As far as the investigation, I summed up several weeks of investigation pretty quickly here for us, so I imagine the prosecution will do a good job of establishing a timeline for the jury that's easy to understand. Defense teams will usually always say that the police zeroed in on their suspect and didn't follow many other leads. That may be a viable option for us unless we can poke holes in the data, such as the cell phone towers. It's important to remind the jury that the cell phone tower data doesn't put him inside the home, only around the home at the time. No investigation is perfect, so we need to find all the spots where it wasn't perfect and lean on those issues and present them to the jury. That brings us to our final defensive strategy, the weird stuff. Every single criminal case I've worked on, both on the defense and the prosecution side, had its fair share of strange consequences. This case is no different. The best thing we can do in this scenario is to present the jury with all the weird issues in this case and see if all of this weirdness creates a reasonable doubt in their minds. A lot of you have probably noticed one of the biggest things I haven't discussed, the roommate and the sole eyewitness of the killer in the home. There's a ton of strange issues that would make anyone raise an eyebrow, and these newly released text messages only make that more apparent. Why didn't she call the police? Why didn't the killer kill her as well? He already killed 4 people. Surely he or she would have wanted to do away with the only witness. Why was she able to go back to sleep after being so worked up? These are all the types of questions that we want to present when she's called as a witness. Of course, there are a lot of potentially reasonable answers to these questions, but that's not our job. We're not here to just assume she has reasonable answers. We need to ask. We are the defense. We may have an idea of what might get said, so we may want to think about that in preparation. I will say, if the real-life defense team had reason to believe she was involved, we would likely know that by now. All of these questions add to the weirdness we want to build in the jury's mind. The house was a party house. There were always people coming and going. We can easily establish that through witnesses, noise complaints, and footage from the parties. The house doors were usually left unlocked, and the victims were known by a lot of people. They were popular. It would certainly make a lot of sense that someone else with knowledge of all of this snuck in and committed these murders. And the last weird thing we'll add to the pot, there were no injuries on Brian, at least that we know of so far. This is certainly not an exhaustive list of viable defenses, but this is what we will be leaning on and researching in the months heading up to trial. If you become aware of any more information or can disprove any of this, please let me know in the comments below. A lot of you may be having second thoughts about becoming internet defense attorneys. Many of you may even be convinced that Brian did it. Keep in mind, as his virtual defense lawyer, it is your job to set that aside. Defense attorneys exist to make sure the system works and does its job. We don't let the prosecution cut corners or let bad police work put people behind bars. The prosecution does their job, we do ours, and we present it all for the jury like a play. Then the jury will go back and do their job. We're here to make sure the show goes on fairly for our client. The trial looks like it should begin soon, so we will keep an eye on the trial and update our documents accordingly. I want to wish you another congratulations on joining the online defense bar. Please remember to subscribe so you aren't disbarred. If you want to look into any continuing education, consider joining our Patreon. We'll be having more in-depth discussions over there and deciding what clients we may get appointed next. I've been your co-counsel, Goodbye You Boudreaux, and have a great night.